people who witnessed bachelor parties going terribly wrong. What's the story? Bachelor party in Las Vegas. Nobody knew that the groom had a problem with gambling. First night we're there. We're all in the casino having drinks and playing cards. Groom gets up to get a drink and never comes back to the group. After hours of searching for him, we finally find him sitting on the bathroom floor of his hotel room crying his eyes out. He lost over $10,000 in just a few hours playing blackjack. We were there for 3 more days and he pretty much didn't even leave his hotel room and was terrified to go home and tell his fiancée he gambled away most of their savings. Yeah. This is tragic. I was naive enough to not realize my soon-to-be husband had a gambling problem, and I wanted to be cool like someone else said above. I was 22 years old at the time, young and stupid. Anyhow, I let Las Vegas be our honeymoon destination. Like 2 days after our wedding, our first day in Vegas, he disappears and won't answer my calls. I was alone for an hour or two before he finally returned. Sitting by the pool by myself, getting hit on by a stranger. I was so fucking sad. That wasn't the last of his gambling escapades, but it was so tragic to me, a young, hopeful new bride, who had just signed her life away to this man. Gambling addiction sucks ass. We are now divorced and I am very glad. I didn't witness but got the account from my ex-husband who was there. Bride-to-be didn't want the groom to have the usual bachelor party because she didn't want strippers and he gets wild when drinking. He peed on my dog when he came over for a chill night of drinks at my house once. They rented a cabin in the middle of nowhere for the party so they couldn't get strippers. With the groom's underage brothers, groom was like 31. Party, they get drunk, start calling places for strippers. Everywhere was like, no, we are not sending strippers last minute to the middle of nowhere. Groom then goes on back door and orders 2 prostitutes to dance for them. 2 methy girls show up. Awkward dancing ensues. Then the groom goes upstairs with them and the younger brothers went outside. My ex went outside to check on them and found them standing on a hill next to the house watching their older brother hooking up with methy prostitutes. Wedding. Drunken best man speech includes announcing to the bride's conservative family the groom just lost his job and the bride was 3 months pregnant. They were hiding both facts. It was a disaster from start to finish. They are still married with 2 kids. Not sure if she ever found out any of it. I haven't seen either of them since the wedding. On the first night of what was supposed to be a crisp fall weekend of camping, cookouts, beer, scotch, and whitewater canoeing, the groom's older brother and future brother-in-law got blackout drunk and started fighting. At first it was just yelling and drunken shit talk, and the rest of us blew it off. They'd never really gotten along and we figured that, as with most drunken disputes between dudes, it would blow over, but instead it escalated until the brother-in-law drew a 45 calories pistol from his backpack, pointed it at the groom's brother's face, demanded the keys to the equipment van, climbed in, locked the van behind him, and immediately passed out, still clutching his gun. At first we were relieved, sure, we were pissed off and in disbelief at what had just happened, but at least the situation was resolved and nobody was hurt. Our relief turned to horror, however, when we realized our sleeping bags, warm clothing, personal belongings, including car keys, and most of the food were still inside the locked van, underneath the groom's drunk, unconscious, armed, idiot future brother-in-law. Nobody was really thinking straight, but we at least agreed we didn't want to break into the van for fear of getting drunkenly shot. We were able to keep the fire going, but what followed was still one very cold, hungry night in the woods. In the morning, we discovered that future Bill had capped off his private festivities by 1. Vomiting in the back of the van, all over our backpacks and sleeping bags, and 2. Leaving the dome light on all night, killing the van's battery. Groom was so angry he simply bailed and went home. The rest of us sat around freezing our asses off in the morning fog while Bill cleaned all our gear. Once he was finished, we jump-started the van, abandoned our plans, and got the fuck out of the woods. I used to bartend at the local college club bar. You know, the type cheap and shitty and loud and dirty but pretends to be a classy establishment but more concerned about making all the money possible, so let's in really questionable people became the go-to bar for the gangbangers from one city over because we would let them in and no one in their hometown would. 1 week after I quit working, their wedding party was in town for their wedding and out for drinks Friday night before the Saturday wedding. Bar lets in a whole group of the gangsters, including a 20-year-old, U.S., note of drinking age, with his face absolutely covered in tattoos. A fight breaks out when they start hitting on the bride-to-be and the groom's brother intervenes and is stabbed in the neck by the 20-year-old with face tats. He bled out in the bar kitchen while my friends who still worked there desperately tried to stop the bleeding with bar rags. From what I heard, they still had the wedding the next day because everything was paid for, but it was very somber. Friend of mine quit on the spot after the ambulance had taken him away. Edit. I looked it up, it was actually the bride's brother and the wedding was on Sunday, not Saturday, with the brother being officially declared dead on the Saturday. This happened to a family friend back in the 70s-80s. Back in the day, the bachelor party was the night before the wedding. Terrible idea, but that's probably why we've gone away from that. Anyways, night before the wedding, the groomsmen decide to kidnap the bride and bring her to a couple local bars. All in good fun. Well, they ended up getting in a terrible car accident. One groomsman died. The bride was in critical condition and nearly died, and the driver was brought to jail for a DUI. I tagged along with my cousin to a bachelor party in rural Nebraska. It was all pretty normal to begin with. On someone's property, big barbecue, barn, drinks, yard games, and then the girls got there. These two meth heads and one of their boyfriends. Of course everyone knows everyone there. They throw down this dirty mattress and the two girls just start going at it while everyone stood around and watched. It was the most repulsive, least erratic thing I have ever seen. I wasn't present, but a friend of mine from high school disappeared out of the back door of a strip club in Atlantic City during his bachelor party. Didn't notify anyone else in the group. They eventually found him dead in a random hotel room, not the rooms they had booked. The next day, family knows the results of the autopsy, but the rest of the story is unknown. Did he leave with a dancer? Did he overdose, etc.? Wasn't there, but a mate was best man for his best friend at this bucks party. After much drinking, there was a race around the block where the groom-to-be, and a few others, took a shortcut through a couple of backyards. Apparently, as they jumped one of the fences, several of them plummeted into a pool under construction, and tragically the groom was fatally impaled on the exposed rebar and died there. This was something that changed everything for everyone who knew him and all his mates. After this terrible event, anyone who had bucks parties after this event were decidedly more low-key and uneventful. My mate still gets really upset when it's ever mentioned. Edit. Hi everyone, did not anticipate such an overwhelming response to this post. I've tried answering some individual questions etc., but easier to do an update en masse. Sorry for the lack of context. This tragedy happened in the very early 90s when construction sites weren't so regulated, hence the no safety cap on the rebar. Thankfully, that has changed. The guys were returning from a local pub crawl and had decided it would be a fun way to end the night with a foot race home. Knowing these blokes, any spewing would have been an instant disqualification. Also, anyone whom took the time to read the post, and it seems quite a few did, I'm hoping that we're all reminded just how the promise and potential of a life can change in an instant. One seemingly harmless action or ill-considered thought will affect you and others in ways we could never imagine. So thank you for reading, thank you for the comments, and please stay safe. I didn't witness it all go down but was present for the aftermath. Friend of a friend was having a bachelor party. Myself and some other friends were at a regular house party at the bride-to-be's apartment. I was there because I was friends with her roommate. Tangled web of friendship, but ultimately I was only acquaintances with the bride-to-be and didn't know the groom-to-be at all. But my friend knew them both, which is how the groom met the bride in the first place. Suddenly, My friend who was at the bachelor party and all the other dudes showed up to the house party, everyone except the groom-to-be. Some drama went on in another room and the bride and her roommate disappeared. Locked in the bedroom, I guess. Not what you're thinking. My friend tells me that apparently the groom thought the groomsman would be cool with him trying to fuck some random chick at the club they went to, but when they saw him with her hands in his pants, they literally just left his ass there and came to the house party. The best man, fiancé of the roommate who I was friends with, told the roommate who told the bride. They broke up and she ended up marrying another friend of mine like 6 years later. Not a bachelor's party, but advice for not trying stupid wedding stunts. Both are from biker groups. On the day of one wedding, bride and groom were both late 30s. All these older bikers who had been drinking decided to do a big drive to the church, which of course turned into a bit of a race. The best man comes off his bike and went straight into a wall and died 10 minutes from the church. I knew a few of them, so this story went around the area. When I was in school years earlier, I remember hearing about another wedding in the next county with more bikers. Some of the same group decided they wanted to have the bride arrive to the wedding on a custom trike. Her dress got caught somehow and she was almost disemboweled and died at the side of the road. Every time I hear about people trying to do something different or a stunt at a wedding, it just scares the shit out of me. Why take a risk on your big day? Keep it simple. Bachelor party and bachelorette party was in the same town. Road trip. At the same time. Towards the end of the night, after all the drinking and strippers, the two groups merged in drunkenness well past closing times of any bar or club. I hooked up with the maid of honor while the two-to-be married had a drunken screaming match about strippers and some guy who apparently talked to the bride-to-be and she tried to invite him to her hotel room. They did get married. The wedding drama was nuts, too, but it's one of those marriages where you're wondering how long until it cracks. They do not have a healthy relationship and now there's meth involved in their lives. I don't talk to either of them anymore. Still with the maid of honor, though. We bought a house last year, so that's cool. Less crazy, more sad. Two friends of ours are now married, and the guy doesn't exactly like making a big fuss. But there's a line between let's just have a nice backyard BBQ after hitting up the gun range, smoke some cigars, have a few beers, and just enjoy each other's company and let's do absolutely nothing. I show up to this bachelor party that got combined with someone else's going away party. We're all hanging out at the cigar bar. I'm talking to the group of guys that are there with the party. We're having some great laughs. I ask, how do you guys know John? All the guys at the party look at each other, look back at me, and ask who's John? I was at the correct party, and I was one of two people, including his fiancée, who knew just who the hell John was. I had offered multiple times to throw and host a small bachelor party with food, stuff to do, and booze that John loves, and wasn't taken up on it. We ended up having a second bachelor party about a month later. Did a small bar crawl after getting some BBQ, had a John-themed trivia game, but the best man and his girlfriend stormed off at some point over a very imagined offense, and at the wedding a few weeks later, they were nowhere to be seen and I showed up and was given the title of best man. Groom has talked to me since and said he should have come to me in the first place. Wedding ended up being a beautiful and very small ceremony and we all had a wonderful time. I stupidly offered to host the bachelor party of a friend at my house. Two strippers were hired. Best man became grabby with them and was acting like a drunk douche. I told him to stop and he slapped me, so we started to brawl. 90% of the people there knew him and didn't know me, so when the brawl broke out, everyone was defending him, you know, because that's my bro. I ended getting kicked out of my own house violently, and they locked the door behind me. I went in through the basement and shut off the breaker, then screamed for everyone to get out. Took about 2 hours and the cops showing up to get everyone to leave. I didn't go to the wedding. We got together for my friend's bachelor party. We all hated his wife-to-be, but he said he was happy and we made it clear she wasn't good for him, but we still loved him. Evening of the bachelor party and we're chilling at our friend's house, sitting around joking, freestyling, just being dumb. We literally had nothing planned other than drinking and hanging out. Suddenly there was a huge bang on the door. My friend thought we got strippers and was pissed. My other friend who organized it said he didn't know who it was. We opened the door and it's his fucking wife to be with her friends. She was sure we had girls there and strippers. Most of us were watching TV. We got really pissed off at her and kicked her the fuck out, and she spent the rest of the night texting him and he chilled over in a corner while we watched TV. You'd never believe it, but they divorced a few years later. Not dead hook or wrong, but we got together at the house of one of the groomsmen to pregame, and not long into it, the homeowner and the groom decided they should take off to go pray. Not a euphemism, they were staunch Catholics and felt like going to church. The rest of us hung out at the house and drank and played rock paper scissors D&D since we had no dice. I think we stayed around hoping that we would actually go party somewhere once the other two came back. Not the best night, but we made do. Years ago I went to a bachelor party for a work colleague that I don't actually know that well, but he is a nice guy and his best man, who I only met a time or two at the bars, that invited me said he didn't have a lot of friends to come and I wasn't doing anything that night, so what the hell, I'll come. I am American, but this was overseas in a place full of expats, so we're all different nationalities. Drunken best man, English, picks a bar fight with a bunch of Irish guys that were in town on vacation or something. I nope out as soon as it starts because I A. am a huge pussy and B. don't want to end up in the local jail. Anyway, the best I can piece together from what I heard is that a young male bar employee tried to get between them to break up the fight and got mildly beat up, but had some undiagnosed clotting disorder and ended up dying. Witnesses were inconsistent with reports of who actually hit the poor guy. Cops got there pretty fast. This place is maybe 1,000 feet away from a police station, so everyone on both sides of the fight went to jail. I was in no way involved and haven't been in a fight since I was a teenager, but I was a regular in that bar and didn't want someone to misremember that I was involved. So I returned to the US as soon as I found out the guy died. I'm no longer in contact with anyone in that country, but last I heard was a year after the event and all those guys were still in jail. A few years ago I was stationed near Vegas, so naturally on long weekends we'd frequent. Well, this bridal party came up to the group of guys that I was there with, and after a couple drinks and walking Fremont they wanted to go to the hotel. The soon-to-be bride wanted a farewell with friend B from my group. Well, the number 2 girl was not having it. Started small but escalated to full-blown screaming in the casino about how you're not going to do that to my brother Ike if she got married, but I know that we got the hell out of Dodge. Edit, spelling. Not mine, but a friend of mine was invited to a bachelor party where they had planned to rent an RV and drive from Minnesota to the Kentucky Derby. They rent the RV and get on their way. Near the border or Iowa they pull over to get some food and use the restroom. One of the guys goes to find something in one of the bags and opens the lower storage compartment only to see a blackened foot sticking out and a horrible stench. They immediately realize it was a dead body and call the police. The entire crew spent the whole time being questioned by the police. Turns out the body was that of a young man who had been drugged up and possibly mugged one night in the middle of winter. He found this RV and decided to get in the storage compartment in an attempt to get warm. He passed away and was missing for months. I believe it was in the paper and all over the news at the time. I was a last-minute inclusion to some acquaintance on behalf of a work colleague who was a groomsman. Usual deal. Went bar hopping, some cigars, some strippers, and finished off the night with some karaoke. As the designated sober guide, I had basically been on tonic water and juice the whole night and proceeded to try and shepherd the group back to either a taxi or their hotel. 3 of the party thought it would be nicer to walk back via the botanical gardens, and as they were passing through, they thought it'd be funny to tie the groom up to a tree for being blacked out drunk. The plan was to head to the hotel for a nightcap and come back for him. Next morning I get a wake-up call from my colleague who had left in a taxi. Hysterical. Asked me to meet up with him at the hospital. Got there, found the room, and in the bed was the groom. So in the 30 to 45 minutes gap when the other 3 had left him, A hobo happened by the groom who was strapped up belly facing the tree. Long story short, groom was raped by said hobo and needed to spend a few days in hospital and trauma counseling afterwards. Wedding was delayed by a couple months, and I was asked by the groom's family and my colleague if I could be a last-minute stand-in as they sought to replace groomsmen. Didn't know the guy, but it was a fun wedding. Edit. Storie delayed response. Easier to provide general details here versus replying individually. Hobo is my term, not actually who it was. Groom was the only witness and he was well intoxicated. Based on his limited description and the police report of evidence found nearby, they reached the conclusion it was likely a vagrant. Location: Melbourne, Australia. Like approx 12 yoctoseconds ago, it was a tough call. In hindsight, I should have went with them to check on the groom, but in reality I thought his best man and groomsmen had it under control. Plus they were locals and they had mates from out of town, so I chose to make sure they were able to find a way home. I went to a friend's bachelor party at his house. His second wedding while still in his 20s. They hired a stripper, hooker. She did her strip show, and took my friend into his bedroom and disappeared for an hour during the party. Yeah, they screwed. She came out wearing his t-shirt. A couple weeks later, he had the wedding. I guess she found out, because he got divorced a month later. Second divorce in his 20s for basically infidelity. Some people shouldn't get married. We did a cabin in a local park and everything went great the first night and got super drunk. I set up a round of golf for a few of the guys including the groom. It had been raining for a few days and let up perfectly for the round. We got out there and the course was super hilly and we were all too hungover from the night before to even drink on the course. We're coming down a hill into like number 7 and I heard a loud bang behind me. I turned around and the groom's cart had flipped and landed on his ankle. Snapped his fibula. He had like 2-3 surgeries and it got seriously infected. Luckily he's fine now, but he was on a scooter for the wedding and did his first dance on a peg leg. Edit. Typo.